For our viewers at home, tell us a little bit about the documentary without going into it, without any spoilers, and then we'll jump right into it.
So this is a feature documentary about Patricia Field, the legendary costume designer who did some work like Sex and the City, Devil Wears Prada, which she was nominated for an Oscar for her costumes, Emily in Paris, many, like 40 TV shows she did, and many movies.
In my opinion, you're a famed documentary filmmaker. I've enjoyed your past works. What brought you to this story? What captured your interest and your imagination?
Well, I'd always known about Pat. I moved to New York in 1985, and I used to go to her store in the late 80s. And then, of course, I've known her work. But I never met her. And before COVID, I did a documentary series for CNN called American Style, which was chronicling style in America from the 40s until the present day. And I interviewed many amazing people for that, which was a wonderful experience. And Pat was one of them. And she came in and did an interview, and she stayed longer than we asked her to, and she was funny and she was smart. And when she left the interview, I turned to my camera guy and I was like, somebody needs to make a documentary on this woman. So that's kind of how the impetus started. It was difficult to talk her into it, but here we are.
Once you talked her into her, I mean, what was your research like? Because, a lot of people didn't know that she owned the store. She owned a store when you had, Stanley Marcus and Teich Gettinger and Marshall Fields and company. You had big names in the fashion business, and then you had her store in New York City, and she gangbusters. I mean, she literally killed it. Was she like, you were telling me earlier on the red carpet that she literally went to Vegas and bought showgirl clothes, and she sold out of it.
Well, I think part of her success is that she doesn't care. She opened a store at the age of 22 in 1966 as a first-generation American, openly gay. I mean, who does that and then has a success for 50 years? So if she had never even done costume design, she would have been incredibly successful from her store alone. But she approached her store the way she approaches her life, the way she approaches her costume design, which is very guttural. It's instinctual. She likes something, she puts it in the store. That's it. It's so simple. She's not looking for trends. In the film, in archival footage, she says, Macy's looks for trends. I create trends. So she just has this fearless approach that's really, infectious and fun to watch. And it's really, really true. I mean, that is who she is. She's a great collaborator, but she does what she wants, and she doesn't care about trends. She doesn't care what anybody thinks. She just does what she wants.
Let's touch on that, because your opening scene is her going out and smoking, and she's like chatting with the camera, and she's becoming vulnerable in front of the camera. So talk to me about, how did you get that shot? And, she's a very humble person. If you do any research on her or even see, interviews with her, she's a humble person. She's always gives credit to her employees and to her collaborators around her, and I think that's what makes her successful. So talk to me about your decision to put something that most documentary filmmakers would put at the end, put at the beginning, to set the tone for such a wonderful person.
Yeah, that is definitely part of her charm and one of the many things that makes her successful. When she initially turned me down, it was because she said, I don't like to be put on a pedestal. And then it took me a couple years to convince her to do this. So that always rung in my head the whole time I was shooting is, don't clean her up. Don't make her too shiny and perfect. She is who she is, and that's what we all love about her. And she smokes, and she says things to people that are not always so kind, but there's something about her that is so charming. Maybe it's her humor, it's also her talent and her creativity, and just her insight. But when she said that, it was actually a kind of a happy accident, because we were in the middle of a shoot, and she went out for a cigarette cigarette smoke, and I would always send my camera guy out to follow her, thinking it was just B-roll, you know. And she turned to him and just started talking to the camera, like completely unprovoked, and said this stuff. And I think if I really think back, it was because of what was happening that day. There was a lot of press that was negative towards her, that she didn't come back to Sex and the City, and she talks about that also in the film. But I can't say it's just me. My editor, Rob Tate, who is an amazing editor who I've worked with on many, many projects for the last 20 years, he and I both really like non-linear storytelling. It just seems so much more interesting than, you know, Pat Field was born in 1942, and, you know, and then going through her life. So in the edit, you know, when you edit a doc, at least the way I do it is you kind of do it out of order. You just start jumping into pieces, and then you start to think about, I mean, you have an idea in your head, but sometimes you put it together and it doesn't work and you move it all around. So we had an idea in our head, and I don't remember how it got there, but at some point we decided to kind of flip the beginning and the end of her story and tell you right off the bat, almost like a tease, almost like a cold open in a TV show, that she is uncomfortable with being in the public eye and uncomfortable with being called an icon. So we started with it. Initially I thought it should go at the end, but once we did that, it kind of affected the rest of the film, and it gets to the point where towards the very end, she's sitting in makeup and you see the marker, the beginning of her interview, and it's like what would have been the beginning of the film near the very end. I think it also goes with this idea we had of life and being very cyclical, and, you know, the last scene, there's talk about immortality and retirement and things like that. So it had this cyclical kind of feeling to it.
Talk to me about your organization skills. Well, I find it very interesting with documentary filmmakers. You're kind of scatterbrained because you got pulling from all different resources. So how do you keep yourself organized? I mean, do you use particular software? Do you use tons of notebooks? I mean, how do you storyboard and how do you keep yourself organized, but
Yeah, it's very old school. 3x5 cards on a board and Excel. I mean, I watched all of our footage. We had 100 hours of footage that we shot following Pat during that 9 months. I watched all of the archival that our archival producer put together, which was close to 300 hours. And I created a spreadsheet. So everything I watched, you know, it had, you know, the name of the tape and the date and the time and this and that and who was in it and what location. And then I would have notes about all the things that I liked. You know, I started to notice, for instance, the title. After I was watching footage and I heard her say Happy Clothes for like the 7th time, I was like, oh my God, that's the title. I had a list of like 70, literally 70 titles, and I hated all of them. And I would every once in a while show them to Pat. I'm like, what do you think of this? And she's like, and I knew they were bad. And then when she kept saying Happy Clothes, and I only used it like 3 times in the film, but she said it many times, I knew that was it. And I said to Pat, what do you think of that title? And she's like, that's it. So that chart, I could always search if I wanted to find where was that other time she said Happy. I would search, and in my notes, I would write extensive notes of things that she said. So if she talked about a particular show or whatever, it was in my notes, and I could easily find where it was. But yeah, it's hard to keep track in your head of 100 hours of footage.
Where did you find your archival footage at? Because, you know, if you're doing a documentary on the Civil War, you know, you could go to certain archives or libraries, but where did you find bulk of her stuff? And does she even have an archive that someone is keeping?
No, she doesn't have an archive somebody's keeping, which was also why it was so important to make this film. But there's a lot of archive out there on her store alone before she even became famous for doing costume design. And a lot of it came from a small company in New York called Video Fashion. Do you know of them? They've been around maybe since the 70s, and they've been recording like every fashion show that's ever happened in New York and anything fashion related. And they had a treasure trove of stuff, like that interview of Pat in 1984 where her voice sounds like a little girl, which blew my mind when I saw that interview. That was from them. Or RuPaul as a very young man in her store when nobody knew who RuPaul was. That was from them. So they were really awesome, and they were incredibly helpful to us. I also had a great archival producer.
That is very important. That is very important because your archival producer keeps everything in line, and they know the little rabbit holes they can go under.
Yeah.
Anything like shocked you? I mean, you did this great CNN series, which I recommend everyone watch if you can. But did anything like jump out at you, like, oh, I didn't know this, or it really changed your perspective on her?
Nothing really shocked me, but there were definitely moments where I thought, oh, that makes a lot of sense. I never thought about that. For instance, when she said to me, when I approach costume design, it's not just about the character on the page, which is what you would think. You read the script and you think who the character is, and that's where it comes from. She said it's also about the actor playing the role, and she somehow combines the two. She said, if somebody else played Carrie Bradshaw instead of Sarah Jessica Parker, she said she would have looked totally different. And I thought, that's really interesting, because it's the same character in the script, but somehow Pat finds, the actor and the character and melds them together in this unique way.
You've done some work for CNN and other television. Is there any difference on how you approach documentary that, this is going to be a motion picture, a feature, versus what you have on television? Is there a difference to your workflow or anything like that?
Well, I mean, there's a difference in my workflow in how I budget a project. I could have extended this into like a 4-part series because I had a lot of footage. But I always knew, being an independent project, I always knew I just wanted to make it a feature. So yeah, there's some times where I can imagine something as being two different genres. But usually I'm very focused about how I approach it and what I want to. When you're shooting for 9 months, you can't just shoot every day willy-nilly and just like, I don't know, what are you doing today? You have to be very specific and focused. And in my case, talking to Pat, like, what's on your schedule? Oh, can we shoot that meeting on Tuesday, or can we shoot this or that? Aside from the logistics of getting permission to be there and shooting the other people, and getting a crew, you can't just shoot and shoot and shoot because it costs a lot of money to have a crew. So you have to be very, very specific and very focused. You have to kind of edit the film in your head as you're going along. Any
advice you would give aspiring documentary filmmakers to, make your subject more comfortable, to keep it, tight? Any advice you would have?
Well, one thing I would say, not on the subject of your talent, but make stuff. Just make stuff. I say that to all filmmakers when I'm teaching. Make as much stuff as you can. Put it out there. Put it on the internet. Somebody's going to see your stuff and say, "I love that." But in terms of talent, I really think there is a trust thing, and I felt it with Pat. I noticed around her, once she trusted somebody around her, you were in. You had her loyalty. But it took a lot to trust her. And I always try to approach my subjects with as much respect as I can, really asking them a lot of questions. Are you comfortable with this or that or the other thing? Being respectful of their time, being respectful of them as a person. So, I was very delicate with Pat, and, we got to a point, I think like 3 months in, where I kind of felt the switch where she trusted me and it was a little more relaxed. But, I think respect, just like in life, it's a lot you're asking of somebody to put a camera in their face all the time and put a mic on them and record everything they say. And sometimes people will say things and not realize and think, oh my God, they just recorded that. I can't believe I said that. that, you have to really be careful with somebody else's life in that sense.
You've been very busy this month. So what has your festival circuit been like so far, and what have the conversations been like after the film?
It has been so great. I mean, every filmmaker wants their film to be seen, and so we've been doing a lot of festivals. We've been getting really great reaction. People have said the film was a feel-good film, which makes me feel good because I didn't quite think of it that way, but in retrospect, I can see that it is. So getting that reaction is really great. As I said, Pat's very funny, so it's a fun watch, and it's fast, and a lot of people have said to me, like, I was never bored, and things like that. As a filmmaker, like, okay, that's great. So that's all been wonderful, and I have to say Naples has been so great. I mean, this festival has just been beautiful. Every event has been beautiful. Everyone's been so warm and welcoming, and it's just been really fun to be here this week.
What does it mean to bring this to the Naples International Film Festival? Because, Southern Florida is known for their arts, and fashion, both Naples here and in Miami on the other coast. So what does it mean to bring this to Naples and show it to an audience that appreciates, the arts and fashion?
Well, I love how this festival is intertwined with the arts and connected with the museum and the Philharmonic and the theater. I think that's great. In fact, I was talking to Kathleen, who's one of the people that runs the festival, last night, and saying, like, it's so funny. It almost seems like a no-brainer when you think about it, yet I've never encountered another festival anywhere in the world that is connected like this to other programs in the arts, which seems brilliant to me. And I think that is why you get the audience that you get here. I mean, everybody comes to the screenings looking amazing, dressed to the nines. It's been very exciting, to see that and see the reaction.
It reminds me of the old Cinerama stuff where people would actually, dress up to go to the movies, and it would
Absolutely.
be an event and not just, oh, we're going to go see the, Star Wars or Harry Potter, But yeah,
they also do it for Pat, even though she's not here. She did come with me. We premiered in New York, and she was there, and everybody got really dressed up. And, if Pat says to you, I love what you're wearing, it's like...
It's the gold standard.
Oh, my God, yes. It's like you've achieved, it's like you just won an Oscar or something.
What are you working on next? I mean, obviously you're traveling with this film some more. What are you working on next?
I have two projects in development. One is a narrative script that I wrote that I'm going to direct, and one is another feature doc. And actually, just last night, I got a call about, I think that the narrative feature, our funding is coming together. And
Mazel tov.
I might be doing that in January, so that would be exciting. And I have amazing actors attached to that project. So it's a project I've been trying to get off the ground for like a decade.
Never give up, right? Never give up.
No. It's a story I want to tell.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you so much.